Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on a ritual that is so common, so ingrained in our daily lives that we rarely stop to examine its chemistry. I'm talking about the morning cup of coffee. And forget the marketing jargon for a minute, gourmet, premium, all that. We are getting right down to the fundamental science of what makes a bean truly alive versus what makes it just, well, old, flat, and honestly disappointing. So our mission today, it's a diagnostic intervention. We're going to unpack the concept of dead coffee versus live coffee. We're using a really actionable checklist, a deep dive into coffee chemistry, all from the material you shared with us. If you're someone focused on performance, on efficiency, this knowledge is your shortcut. It's about optimizing the fuel you put in your body every single morning.
And to do that, we really have to shift our perspective. Fundamentally, we need to stop treating coffee like a non-perishable grocery item, something that can just sit on a shelf forever. We have to start treating it like a highly sensitive agricultural product. It has a peak, a very finite window of perfection, and then it has a very hard expiry date. So the question we're asking is, how do we identify that perfect window? And maybe more importantly, how do we prove it with science?
I think we found the answers. Once we walk through the chemistry of how that flavor just collapses, we will give you the 3 definitive non-negotiable tests you can run right now to diagnose the freshness of the beans you have in your cupboard. And yes, that includes the most critical one, the scientific proof, the Bloom test. But let's unpack the problem first. Where does this all start?
It starts in the supply chain. We call it the convenience trap. The fundamental flaw in the commodity coffee model, the one that fills those massive supermarket shelves, is that it has to prioritize shelf life and scale. And of course, the lowest possible price point. And that financial focus, it forces a supply chain that actually guarantees staleness.
The sources just nail this with a fantastic analogy. They say people treat coffee like a canned good, a tin of beans, things designed to last for years. But coffee, once it's roasted, it should be viewed much more like
fresh bread.
Exactly. Fresh bread.
It's the perfect way to think about it.
It has that beautiful, brief peak, and then it immediately begins its journey toward expiry.
Precisely. When you look at the economics of mass distribution, the roast date becomes irrelevant to the business model. That bag has to go from the roaster to a distribution center, sit on a pallet, then it sits on a shelf, and maybe, just maybe, it makes it into your cart. And to survive that whole journey, that multi-month journey, the coffee has to be engineered for survival, not for peak flavor.
So what are we talking realistically?
If you pick up a bag from a major chain, you are easily looking at a roast date of 6 months ago.
6 months.
And that long delay, that is the definition of dead coffee.
Okay, so if the convenience trap is what sets the stage for months of degradation, let's get into the precise science. What is actually happening chemically to that bean after it leaves the roaster? Why does it lose its character so fast? It feels almost instantaneous.
It all comes down to a chemical time limit, and it's governed by 2 critical stages, post-roast. The first stage, and this one is so important to understand, is degassing. Right after roasting, the bean is under this intense internal pressure from carbon dioxide, from co-zero. So for the first, say, 5 to 10 days, that gas is just slowly escaping. And what's crucial here is, well, it's twofold. First, this gas is like a natural shield. It's literally pushing oxygen out. It's protecting the delicate internal lipids and oils.
A bodyguard for the flavor.
A bodyguard, yes. That's a great way to put it. But second, you actually need that gas to escape before you brew. If you brew coffee that was roasted yesterday, it's often gassy and sour. The Kyo-Euro interferes with the water.
It gets in the way of the extraction. So day 1 coffee is too gassy. It tastes lemon, a bit sharp, unbalanced. The Kyo shield is strong, but the flavor can't get out evenly. The challenge then is timing that perfect sweet spot right before the shield is completely gone.
Exactly. And once that internal CO pressure drops, usually after the first 2 weeks or so, the second and much more destructive stage takes over. And that is oxidation. Without that protective layer of gas, oxygen moves in.
Right.
And it begins attacking those delicate oils and lipids.
And that's the real villain then. Oxygen breaking down all those amazing flavor compounds. I mean, we talk about flavor notes, the blueberry, the caramel, the jasmine. Those are complex chemical structures. What happens to them specifically?
They turn rancid. Oxidation breaks those complex lipids down into simpler, harsher compounds, specifically aldehydes and ketones. Those are responsible for that stale, greasy, sometimes overwhelmingly woody or bitter flavor you get with old coffee, the actual interesting flavor notes, the unique character of the bean. They evaporate first. They're too volatile.
And that makes perfect sense. And the sources define this peak flavor window that we should all be aiming for. So if day 1 is too gassy and a few months later it's rancid, where is that sweet spot?
The chemistry shows that the best flavor, when the Kyoeuro's interference is minimal, but that protective shield is still pretty effective, is usually found between day 14 and day 30 post-roast.
So about 2 weeks to 1 month.
That month is the golden zone. After that, when those beautiful volatile aromatics are gone and the oils have oxidized, the source material calls what's left the ghost of coffee.
The ghost, I like that.
Yeah, you get the bitterness, you get the punch of caffeine, but the entire character, the soul of the bean, is just gone.
Okay, knowing how fast those molecules collapse is making me a little paranoid about the beans in my own cupboard right now.
Yep.
So let's give you, the listener, the absolute non-negotiable checklist. This is the 3-step freshness diagnostic.
Step 1 is the bag check, or what we call the paper trail. The single most crucial indicator, the absolute deal breaker, is the date. You must demand to see the specific roasted on date. Day, month, and year.
And if the bag only has a vague best before date, which is usually a year or two out, that is a giant red flag. They're just using a marketing tactic to hide the age. The best before date means nothing to the chemistry of the bean. You need that roasted on date. It's the only way to know if you're in that precious day 14 to day 30 window.
Next, look at the one-way valve. You see it on almost every high-quality bag. Its real purpose is simple.
Yeah.
It lets the QO so the bag doesn't burst. It is not primarily for smelling the coffee. If you squeeze the bag near that valve, you should get a punchy, intense burst of aroma. That's a clear sign that QO's pressure is still there.
And conversely, there are 2 warnings here. Avoid bags that are vacuum sealed into a rock-hard brick. The mechanical pressure needed for that actually crushes a lot of those volatile compounds. And if you squeeze a standard bag and nothing happens, no scent, no resistance.
It's so old it has 0 gas left. It's a fossil.
Okay, let's move on to step 2, the grind rule. This is an essential one we sometimes overlook for convenience.
And this one is non-negotiable. Pre-ground coffee is chemically dead on arrival.
Dead on arrival.
The moment you grind a bean, you increase its surface area, its exposure to oxygen, exponentially. Think about it. The entire inside of the bean is now open to the air. That oxidation clock, which was ticking slowly, it suddenly starts racing. The flavor protection ends the second the grinder hits the bean. If you value freshness, you have to buy a whole bean. Grind it right before you brew.
That is a tough truth for a lot of people, but the science is clear. All right, moving to step 3 of the checklist, the visual and tactile test. This is once you get the beans out of the bag. The first thing to look for is the sheen, right?
Yes. Fresh, high-quality beans, especially light or medium roasts, should generally have a slight matte or satin finish. They shouldn't look wet. If the beans look sweaty or really slick and oily, it means the internal oils, those lipids we discussed, have migrated to the surface. That happens when the coffee has sat for too long.
Right, we've all seen that look in the supermarket bins, that glistening, slick look. And that sheen is just visual evidence that oxidation has already started. The oils are turning rancid right there on the bean surface.
And speaking of touch, there's a surprising tactile test, the static test. When you grind truly fresh coffee, the friction, combined with the ideal balance of moisture and oil, it generates static electricity.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, the grounds will subtly cling to the walls of your grinder. Old, brittle coffee has lost that internal moisture and lipid balance. It can't create that static clink.
So if the grounds just dump out flat and dusty, that's a bad sign.
A very bad sign of age.
Okay, we've covered the bag, the grind, and the look of the beans. Now we get to the definitive scientific moment of truth.
Yeah.
Section 4. The ultimate proof, the bloom test.
This is it. If you can only run one test in your kitchen, this is the one. It uses chemistry to prove indisputably whether that protective Kyoeuro shield is still inside the beans you're about to brew.
So let's detail the method for everyone. You put your grounds in a pour-over dripper or a French press, whatever you use.
Yeah.
And you pour a very small amount of hot water over them. The source is really specific about the temperature here. Use water at 94 degrees Celsius. That's about 201 Fahrenheit.
And that temperature isn't arbitrary. 94°C is hot enough to cause thermal shock, which maximizes the Kyoeuro release. But it's not so hot that it scorches the delicate compounds. You add just enough water to wet the grounds, maybe double their weight, and then you just wait. 30 seconds.
And then you watch.
Yeah.
The results are, well, they're binary, aren't they? It's either a yes or a no.
Completely. If the coffee is alive, it will swell dramatically. It'll bubble vigorously. It will bloom like a small aromatic volcano. That rapid bubbling you see, that's the trapped Kyoeuro being violently released by the hot water. That bubbling is your scientific confirmation. The protective gas is still there. You're in the peak flavor window.
That bloom is the coffee telling you it's ready. My own first bloom test was, it was really eye-opening. I realized I'd been drinking dead coffee for years. It just looked like a flat, muddy swamp, not a volcano.
Exactly. And if the coffee is dead, the water just sinks straight through. Flat grounds, zero movement, zero bubbles. The battle with oxygen was lost a long, long time ago. The CO is gone. You're left with just the ghost.
So what does all this mean when we connect the science back to value and quality for someone who's focused on optimization? This feels like the core distinction between the commodity model and the craft model.
It is. The commodity model, built for months of shelf life, is all about consistency. It wants every single cup to taste the same. It doesn't matter where the bean is from or its raw quality. And to achieve that and to mask the fact that the beans are old, they use the charcoal effect. They over-roast the beans to a dark, oily, burnt finish. The bitterness masks any flaws.
So the reason so much commodity coffee tastes universally burnt is because the roaster is actively trying to hide the lack of quality or the age of the bean. It's a masking agent.
Precisely. Now compare that to the craft model. They rely on a fast supply chain. They want you to get the coffee within 7 days of roasting. They prioritize flavor over shelf life. The whole goal is to let the unique terroir, the soil, the altitude, the rainfall, actually show up in the cup.
And you can't get that rich, nuanced experience from dead coffee.
Impossible.
So this brings us back to the high-performance angle.
Okay.
If my goal is optimal cognitive function, mental clarity, does drinking live coffee actually translate into better mental output than that harsh, stale ghost coffee?
I believe so, absolutely. The consumption experience itself matters. When you're drinking a high-quality, fresh, complex beverage, it engages more of your senses. It's a sensory input that primes your brain differently than just slamming a bitter shot of pure caffeine. You get the fuel without the degradation from rancid oils, and the act of appreciating the flavor reinforces focus. It's not just utility, it's quality input leading to quality output.
So it's the difference between a high-end tailored suit and a fast-fashion t-shirt.
Great analogy.
Both cover your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one is an investment in quality, comfort, and experience.
Mm-hmm.
The other is just pure utility. You're investing in the fuel for your brain. Okay, quick recap for you. If you want to level up your morning ritual, you have to look for the specific roasted on date. Religiously avoid the best before by whole bean. And always, always run the definitive scientific bloom test when you get home. It takes 30 seconds and tells you everything.
And this all requires that mindset shift we talked about at the start. You have to move from a consumer mindset, where you're just buying caffeine, to a connoisseur mindset. You're buying a sensory, chemical experience that genuinely fuels your cognitive performance. I mean, as someone striving for efficiency, you wouldn't tolerate stale ideas or flat results in your work, would you? So why settle for dead coffee?
That is the perfect thought to carry with us. And as we leave you to go check the dates on your current bag, let's leave you with one final provocative thought that builds on this chemistry. Given that we know oxygen is coffee's single greatest enemy, that it destroys those delicate lipids, is there a specific small tool like choosing a burr hand grinder over a fast, friction-heavy blade grinder that could be our last line of defense against oxidation, extending that precious peak flavor window even once the coffee is safely home and open? Something to mull over this week. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.